Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Samach Dalid in Nizir, as we learn for a four shlema for Akiva ben Chayrochel. Today we also learn for Aliyas Neshama of Miriam Bas Shlomo Zalman Alevi Kubek, Sammy Kubek's mother, Moshe Chaim ben Tzvi Yehuda Laboda, Howard's father, and Ita Bas Moshe Tzvi Cohen Katz, my good friend Rabbi Marty Katz from America's mother, all of whose yard sites are today. So we'll start from Tana Rabbanan, about 6 lines down of the page, 6-7 lines down where we left off yesterday. Tana Rabbanan. Now, remember, we saw yesterday, we introduced the concept of tumas tahom. When there's a tumah that's in the depths, meaning it wasn't known to anybody. It's likely that nobody ever saw this. It's possible that this person had died and nobody had ever seen it. And there were certain kulas that we had, the halacha mashmi Sinai, when it comes to a Nazir and an Osa Pesach, and that a Nazir Osa Pesach who they thought that they were Tohar, they completed their process, and then they found out that during the interim, they had possibly come across this dead body that nobody knew about. There's a special heter, and the person who made the Korban Pesach doesn't have to bring a second Korban Pesach, and Pesach Sheni, and the Nazir doesn't have to start all over again. There was only in the circumstance where the Nazir was Tohar, he completed his process, and he either bought a korban according to the Chachamim, who said that completes it. According to Rabbi Lezer, you also have to shave. And after he had done that, he found out that in the interim, before he had come across a tumas tahom, it doesn't so. That's a special loch l'Moshe Sinai. But normally, if you go into a mikvah, or even in the case of the Mishnah, let's say he went into a mikvah to be tovel, and then he found a dead body floating in the water, you assume he's tamei. Why? Because he was probably either the dead body floated over him, overshadowed him, or he overshadowed it. Even if they didn't touch, but he probably came in contact, at least with the dead body. And therefore, if he was on his way, if he found the body, embedded in the ground, like sunk into the ground, that's tumas tahom. And if he just went in there stam, and he was a nazir, he's okay. However, if he wanted to be matayr himself because he was already a tamei mace, then we have what's called chazaka. Chazaka, he was tamei before, he's tamei now too, even though it was tumas tahom. So the tumas tahom is only a kula where he is tahor, and it's possible that he came across a tumas tahom. If a body's floating, that's not tumas tahom, that's exposed. Again, the heter for a nazir and a Osa Pesach of tumas tahom is only if it was a body that was heretofore unknown. You could assume nobody ever saw it before, that nobody knew it was there. And he was tar at the time, and now when he completed it, he did everything else. He wasn't tamei mace before. This was the only thing that would have been matame him, and he thought he was tar. And the same thing, korban Osa Pesach. Then he's okay. However, if the body was floating, that's not unknown. So a floating body is matai. Now this floating body will lead us into today's daf. Tana Rabbanan.
This also applies to someone who's tahor.
No, only for a Nazir and a Osa Pesach.
So someone who's tahor and he brings his korban Pesach.
Now
he finds out he was over.
That's right. Then he's okay. He's okay. He doesn't have to bring a second carbon.
He doesn't.
No, we're not right. Exactly. We're not talking about a regular case of a person. It's stam. He's a Kohen or whatever, even a non-Kohen, and he came across a tumas tahom. It could be that he shouldn't be, so let him get sprinkled in the 3rd and 7th days, and no carbon is necessary. He's tummy for 7 days, big deal. But when it comes to Nazir and Osa Pesach, it's a special kula. Tana Rabbanan, Kol Nitlan Vanigorn, anything which is carried or dragged, meaning it's on the ground. It's like an inanimate. Not inanimate isn't the right word. It's not a movable thing. It's just sitting on the ground. It's something that has to be picked up and carried or dragged. And now it's a suffix if you touch that, if it was tamei. So it's fake and tamei. The assumption is, if you're not sure if you touched it, you're tamei shein k'menachem, because it's like sitting on the ground. And if it's sitting on the ground, it's like a suffix tamei b'shus yachol. We're going to learn Sota. We're starting Sota Thursday, Friday. And we learn out from Sota that tell me why she's in a Nistri tomorrow. It's like a Rosh Hashanah where she possibly committed adultery. That's always a Rosh Hashanah. It's in a private area. So we learn from there, and the sake is Tameh. We assume she's Tameh. Sota by definition is a suffix. If you know for sure that she committed adultery, she's not a Sota. She's an adulteress. So Kol Nitlan V'Nigar and Sveiken Tameh, anything which is picked up or dragged, it's like it's sitting on the ground. And in other words, it's stationary. That's the word I'm looking for. It's stationary. And therefore, it's like a suffix Tameh Rishus Yachid, and it's a suffix if you touch it, you're Tameh. Behind is Rokin, but if it's something which is thrown, something that flies through the air or floating in the water, in other words, it's not stationary, Sveik and Tar, that is a suffix, because that's like a suffix Tameh Rishus Harabim. And suffix Tameh Rishus Harabim is Sveiko, we assume it's Tahar because it's movable. In other words, it's in an open area, it's movable. If it's something which is lifted up, carried, schlepped along, dragged, then it's like sitting in one place. It's like in a private area, and a suffix, if you touched it, you're tamei. If it's something which is thrown through the air, then the suffix is if you touched it, and there we don't say that. Just because the suffix naga ben adam akalim, suffix lo naga, we don't say that. We don't say it's like it's on the ground, and therefore it's like rishus yachid, but rather we say it's tar. Chutz, here's the exception. It's important because I except for a dead body or a piece of a dead body. The word pnei tumah is a little extra over here, means or you were oil on it, right? Meaning that if it was a dead body, if you're talking about touching something, if it's something which is dragged or picked up, then it's like it's on the ground. It's like it's tamei. If it's something which is thrown through the air, some tumah was thrown through the air. It's a question of you touched or not. No, we go suffix is tar. However, if it's a piece of a dead body, which could have flown over you or you flew over it, or anything which is tummy from above and below, including a zav and a zava. If a zav and a zava sat, let's say, on a Evan Masama, which is a heavy rock, and you were in a pit underneath that, or vice versa, the zav and zava were underneath it, you sat on a heavy rock on top of it, also the tumah goes down and goes up. So in cases like of a tumas mess or a zav and a zava, specifically, zav is not mitame ba'oel, but it's mitame in this case of Evan Nasam when it sits on top of you, or you sit on top of him, you're tame. But ba'oel, in the case of a mess, then you are tame, right? Because Eisman a mess. If it's something which is some piece of tumah which is thrown through the air, and so something you touch or not, so we say sometimes shusarabim is tar. However, if it's a kazayisman a mess, could have flown over you, you didn't have to touch it. Just ba'oel, you're tamei, and there you're tamei. So that's what we say here. Something is thrown through the air normally is not matame. Something if you touched it or not, you're not sure. You go lakula itar, unless it's something like kazayis manames, which is matame even ba'oel. Boira marchama. So let's understand it. So again, a stationary item. If it's a suffix, if you touched it, suffix if you touched it, you go lachumra. Why? Suffix kamshasiyachid is tamei. If it's a non-stationary, a moving item, let's call it a moving item, an item, let's say, thrown through the air or floating on the water, it's moving around. In a case like that, a suffix is tahor, except if it's kazayis manames, because a kazayis manames is matame even ba'ohel. Now,
what kind of tumah? What level of tumah?
So right, so and any level of tumah that we're talking about over here, whether it's for a day, let's say an animal or a sheretz, or a person is matamayu by touching. Either one is touching. So the question here is, did you touch it? See, when it comes to a kazayis of a mess, then oil is good enough. So that's why you're tamei. If a kazayis when a mess was thrown, and it's a suffix, whether you touched it or not, doesn't have to be, even if you didn't touch it. The problem is it's matamim ba'oil. Therefore, some ba'oil, you go l'chumra. But if it's not a kazayis mess, let's say it's a dead sheretz or a piece of nevela, something which is tamei like that. That's the tumah that we're generally talking about. Or shechvazera, as we'll see. Shechvazera was thrown, something that was stationary and now was thrown. If it's something which is normally stationary, nitlan v'nigrorin, you have to pick it up. It's considered stationary. Suffix if you touched it. Suffix yachid is tamei. If it's something which is thrown, that's tar, because unless it's kazayis manames, which is matame ba'oel. So the question over here is, so again, a stationary item is matami. If it's a suffix, if you touched it, suffix if you touched it, you know for sure you touched it, you're tummy. But if it's a suffix, if it's a stationary item, you assume you go l'chumra. If it's a moving item, you're tar. Okay, what about this? Let's say there's a piece of a dead body or a dead body in a vessel, and the vessel is floating on the water. So the vessel is movable, but the body is stationary. Right now, what is the gears over here? See, the Gra puts in sheretz because we're not talking about a dead body, because the dead body is talking about oil also, right? But let's say you have a sheretz. Let's say you have a sheretz in a kli. Now, and the kli is moving. Now, Basri, do you look at the kli? And if it's kli, that's stationary. The kli is stationary. The sheretz is in a kli, right? So, is it like the sheretz is on the ground? It's something which is lifted up or carried or dragged, whatever. And therefore, it's the chumrah or basar mesa aslein. Or do you look at the mesa? Again, he means the sheretz. Or do you look at the he says maya? Maya. Do you look at the thing, or do you look at the meaning, or do you look at the maya? You look at the water. The water is moving. So again, we're saying if it's a movable item, it's tahar. If it's moving, it's tahar. If it's stationary, it's tameh. Stationary is like something comes yachid. Moving is like something comes ravim. So here the question is this: if you had a sheretz and a kli, a dead sheretz, of course, which is tameh. You have tumah in a kli, and the kli is floating on the water. Do you look at the kli? Do you look at the kli? The kli is stationary, and therefore you should go to chumrah and say if it's something you touch it, you are tameh. Or do you look at the water? The water is moving. Imtam salomar. Now, let's say in this case, Rashi has the girsa that it's meis b'kli, that it's a dead body in the kli, not like the gra. He has the gears like we have in our Gemara. Take a look at the first line of the wide lines in Rashi, not the widest at the bottom, the wide lines of Rashi. Right, it says over there, now, if it's a dead body, the dead body is matami gmol. But let's say you know that you weren't mile on it. You know that it didn't go over you, you didn't go over it, you weren't both under the same OL. But that's how Rashi learns. The Gra learns we're not talking about a mace, we're talking about a sheretz. Okay, fine, but in either case, the question is, did you touch it or not? That's the question. Did you touch it? You're not sure if you touched it, right? We're not talking about tumas OL, because tumas OL is tameh, we said, even if it was flying around, it was floating around. But here, we're talking about a case where the question is, you wasn't OL. The question is, you're not sure if you touched it or not. So what does that have a rule? Does it have as a stationary? Do you look at the kli? The kli is stationary, or do you look at the water, or look at the dead body is floating around? Now, going on Rashi, in the Mishnah, the previous Mishnah we had, they were talking yesterday about the Nizir, and he went down into the mikveh, and then he found the body floating there. That's an exposed body, and he's tameh. Maybe the body floated over him, or he floated over the body. Here he knows he wasn't. It's not sure if he touched it. So how do you look at it? Do you look at the kli? The kli is stationary in the chumrah, or do you look at the water or the mace, and the mace is floating around? And say, well, let go the chumrah. Look at the kli. The kli is stationary, and therefore it's a suffix. If you touch it or not, you're tameh. What about mace al gabe sheretz mahu? What happens if the mace, or again, his girsa is mace al gabe sheretz, sheretz al gabe mace. The gross girsa sheretz al gabe mace. But in our Gemara, we have mace al gabe sheretz mahu. What happens if the dead body, there was no OL, right? The only question is if you touched it. Well, what someone's a sheretz? Kivan the high tumas erev, high tumas shiva, two different kinds of tumah. A sheretz is only tumas erev, you only tummy for one day till the evening, and one is tumas shiva. Is it command machsa tumah b'kli? So it's like the mess or the tumah that we're talking about was sitting on top of a sheretz. It's like sitting in a kli because there's two different kinds of tumas. So it's like sitting in a kli, and therefore the mess has a halacha. Again, what's our question? Did you touch the body? Not an OL. You know for sure you weren't mile on it. Question is, when it comes to touching tumah, and you're not sure if it was stationary or not. So he said, if it's stationary, you're tameh. If it's moving, you're not. If it's moving, you're not tameh. You're not tameh. So the question over here is, the mace was on a sheretz, and the sheretz was floating. It's like a mace in a box. Is it like it's in a box, and therefore it's like sitting in a kli, and the kli is stationary, and you go l'chumrah? Dami odilma tuma samechti, or do you say no? it's all one big tumah. That the sheretz is tummy, the body is tummy. Therefore, it's like one solid mass. Samichta means it's like one solid mass, and that's moving in the water. And if it's moving in the water, it's moving. Moving means tahor, unless unless it would be oil. But for sure you were in mile according to Rav Shapiro. Imtim saloma. Each time we're going to go lechumra. Imtim saloma k'ma when the mace is sitting on a piece of sheretz floating, and the sheretz is floating in the water, it's like putting in a kli, and the kli is stationary. I mean, do you say the tamei vadein? It's considered tamei. Those words are taken out possibly. Sheretz like abin nevela. What happens if a sheretz is sitting on an nevela? The nevela stuff amount. What happens that keeping the bar tumas erev? Both an nevela, a dead carcass, carcass is dead, right? A carcass of an animal, and the sheretz, which is dead. Since they are both tumas erev, they're both only tumah for one day. Therefore, it's like one item. They're both tumas erev. Therefore, tumas michti, it's one solid mass, and therefore the solid mass is floating on the water. And therefore, if it's a question you touch, we're talking about when you touch the upper item. If you the stuff you touch the lower item is for sure floating, right? The nevela. But if you the upper one, we're concerned when you touch the upper suffix, if you touch the upper one on top of the bottom one, is the upper one considered like in a kli? Because the lower one is like a kli, and therefore it's like a stationary item, and you'd be tamei. Or do you say the whole thing is like one big mass of tumah floating on the water, and therefore you'd be tahor? Odoma. So again, Sheretz like I'm an avail stuff amount. Keeping the bar tumah since they're both the same kind of tumah for one day. Since they're both one kind of tumah samichti, and therefore it's one big tumah floating. Odilma hai kazayis vai kadasha. They are still different. Why? Because even though touching a carcass or touching a dead sheretz, in both cases you're tummy only for one day, but there's a different shiur for both, different a measure for what makes you tummy. When it comes to a nevela, a carcass, it's a kazayis. When it comes to a sheretz, it's only the size of a lentil bean. So odilma hai kazayis, since they're separate, so therefore it's like the sheretz is sitting on the nevela, it's like sitting on a box or sitting in a kli, and therefore it's stationary. Go l'chumra. And if you say that, what about sheretz like a sheretz? What happens if one sheretz is on top of another sheretz? Same thing. And the question is, did you touch the upper sheretz? The lower one for sure is floating in the water. But here we're talking about where the question is, did you touch the upper mouth? Hani vadi chad shiur, they're both the same shiur, both tummy for one day, and both tummy by you become tummy by a measure of a lentil, and therefore they're both floating together. It's like one big mass of floating, and therefore you should be tahor. That's moving. Since they are separate from one another, two separate shrutzim. There's 8 different minim of shrutzim that are. There's maybe millions of kinds of shrutzim, but there are 8 that are mitami if they're dead. Even the mitzvah, since they're separate, maybe it's like one is sitting on top of the other. And the question is, did you touch the upper one? The upper one was considered sitting in a box, or the lower sheretz was stationary, and therefore you become imtim flom sheretz like a sheretz, given the mitzvah, since they are separate from one another. Therefore, it's like the sheretz is in a box, and you go l'chumer, it's tamei. Command the mochel the kli, it's like sitting in a kli. Sheretz like a nevela. What about sheretz sitting on a carcass that was liquefied, dissolved? Now, what do you say over there? Do you look at, since it's dissolved, is it like mao? Since it's dissolved, it's liquefied, it's like water, it's like liquid, and therefore it's certainly floating. Is the sheretz floating? If sheretz is floating, it's movable, and therefore the suffix, if you touch it or not, you go l'kula. Odilma hayochlu. Fact is, it's really like a kind of a food. I mean, it's food for dogs, whatever, but it's a food, or it's a solid, or it was originally a food, and therefore you look at it as, even though it's liquefied now, but it's still like a solid mass of food, and therefore it's like sitting in a kli. Even though it's liquefied, since you say that since it was originally a food, or it's solid, even though it's liquefied now, but it's still like a mushy solid, and therefore it's like sitting in a box. What happens if a sheretz was floating on some semen that was detached from a human body? What would you say there? In terms of keeping this idea, you say since it's detached, it's also like a mass of food. It's not food, obviously, but it's like a mass of food, and therefore you're tamei. Or do you say no? Here it's certainly sitting on a liquid. The semen floating in the water is just like water floating, and therefore If you say that sheretz lagabe mechatos, if you say even the Masaka V'lekuchla, if you say that it's like a separate solid item, because since it's detached from the body, it's not like liquid in a body. He compares it to urine in a body, which is not, it's just liquid. That's liquid, but this has been separated from the body, so it's like a solid, and therefore it's like your tameh because it's sitting. The sheretz is sitting in a kli, and the kli is stationary. What about sheretz like mechatos? What happens if you have mechatos, which is the purifying waters that are constructed, that are made from the paraduma? So since it's made from the paraduma ashes, it's got a certain thickness to it. So what would you say there? Would you say that that's the thickness makes it like a solid, and therefore the sheretz is like sitting on a stationary item? Or mechatos is floating on the water. What would you say there? Or do you say no? It's still watery, it's still liquid, and therefore the sheretz is floating, and therefore you'd be tar. All these questions, lo yadinan, we don't know the answer to them. They all stand. These are all questions that we can't resolve. So that's as far as the tumas tahom goes. Now, we're not finished with tumas tahom. We come back to Nazir and tumas tahom. Amar Rav Amnuna, Nazir osa Pesach. Someone says it's halacha. Remember what we said, that a Nazir osa Pesach who came across some while they were tahor, after they had purified themselves, or after they brought the carbon Pesach, we go lakula. Here he says, Nazir osa Pesach shahalcha bekevertam. They were exposed. They came in contact with a kevertam b'shvi shalahem, on their seventh day of purification, meaning the Nazir was tameh, the person making the carbon Pesach was tameh. They counted 3rd, 3rd, and 7th days of sprinkling. They went and they were going to the mikveh on the 7th day. Tahorim. Rav Nuna says they're tar. In other words, the Nazir is okay. He can complete it. And the carbon Pesach, he doesn't bring the carbon Pesach. My timer. Tumas tahom lemister. Because tumas tahom is not strong enough, not powerful enough to knock off to require him to bring an carbon Pesach and to knock off his days of Naziris. Masav Rava, so Rava says, what do you mean? What about our Mishnah? Our Mishnah said that when is tumas tahom okay if you were tahor? Everything was okay. You fulfilled your 30 days of Naziris. Then you found out afterwards that you came in contact with a kever tahom, a tumas tahom. Then it's a special etzah. But over here, you were tameh. Our Mishnah said if you went down, the Mishnah said Yared litar, Masav Rabbi Yared, went down to be mitayir yourself. You were tameh. While you were a Nazir, you became tameh. Now you went to purify yourself, mitumas hameis. And what happened? You came across the tumas tahom. Yared litfol b'mar v'nimtza meis sefal gavei. And then you're tameh. Nimtza b'shukah b'karka demara. Yared lakar tar. Litar, the Mishnah said, if you went down into the mikveh to be mitayir yourself, mitumas meis, then you're tameh, because even though it's a tumas tahom, but it's a chazaka that you were tameh. So over here you were tameh. The Rav Amuna's case is talking about nazar besach shalcha bekevertam b'shvi shalen on their 7th day when they being mitayir yourself. So Rav says, what do you mean? Our mission says yarli tar mitumas mes tameh shecheskes tameh tameh shecheskes tar tar. The chazaka is ends up the Mishnah sharaglayim ladavar. There's feet to it. In other words, there's good reason to believe. There's a presumption over here. If you were tameh before, even though you came across now a kever tahom, which we're makelon only when you're for sure tar already. You were tar till now, and you finished your process, and then you found out, you came across a kever tahom, so he has a special kula halacha mashmi sinai. But when you were tameh, that doesn't help you. So over here you're talking about you're a tameh. So why do you say that the Nazir is okay? Masav Rav again in the Gemara. Yarli tar mitumas hameis tameh shecheskes tameh tameh shecheskes tar tar. Chazak is tameh. Why do you say over here this Nazir is okay? He was tameh. He was trying to purify himself in his tameh. Amalei. So Rav Nuna told him, Modina lecha b'nazir shemachusar teglachas. I agree with you. If the Nazir hasn't finished purification process from his state of tumah, not the purification of their 30 days of tiglachas tahara, the tiglachas tumah. We're talking about a Nazir who became tamei meis. He was exposed to a dead body, purified himself for 7 days, and then what does he have to do? Shave and bring the birds and the karban asham. Here, if over here he says, I moted to you, a Nazir that hasn't yet shaved after his 7 days of tumah, he hasn't yet shaved yet. There I moted to you, like the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says if you're tameh and you went into the mikveh, even if you came across Tumas home, no, that doesn't help you because the chazak you're still tamei. Where do I say my case? So that my case, the people like Tuma, Umasnis is Mishnah speaking about where Umasnis Ariyacha the Mechus Diglachas Shariaf. The Mishnah speaking about where you haven't done the shaving yet. Sharehu Yar Litbo, he went down to the mikveh. What's the Mishnah says? The Mishnah says Yar the Tamei. Mishnah says Yar the Lakatar Litar. He went down into the mikveh to be matar himself. That means he hasn't yet shaven because when he's Tamei mace during his Nazir's period, he purifies himself, sprinkling on the third and seventh day, goes to mikveh, and then he shaves. So over here, when he went down to the mikveh, he hasn't shaved yet. For Rav Hamnuna speaking about Bishvi Achar Tiglachas. What did Rav Hamnuna say? Look at the top line in the Gemara again. Rav Hamnuna, Bishvi Shalahen on the seventh day after he had shaved. After he had shaved, he's already tar. Even though we'll see he's missing Herav Shemesh, he's got to wait till the end of the day. He needs sundown to finish it, but that comes by itself. That's something that he has to do. So here, Rav Hamnuna is speaking about a case where a Nazir, in the middle of his Nazir, let's say on the 15th day, he went to a funeral. By mistake, he went to a funeral, came to the mace, purified himself for 7 days. On the 7th day, went to the mikveh, and he shaved already, and then he came across the Tumas to home. In a case like that, he's okay. Why? Because he's tar now. He's tar now. Okay, so and then he found out afterwards. They didn't know until after they finished this. Again, when is the cool of this Nazir Tahom? Let's understand Nazir Tahom, the Kever Tahom that we talked about yesterday and today, by the Korban Pesach and by the Nazir, speaking about where he didn't know about it, but he was tar at the time. The Korban Pesach guy finished his, he was tummy for 7 days, fine. So he finished the 7 days, he purified himself. The Nazir who became tummy has to do an additional step. He has to shave and bring korbanos, but he shaved. He finished shaving. So Rav Hamnuna is talking about a case like that, where the Nazir on his 7th day of Tumah, while he was a Nazir, became tummy, purified himself for 7 days, went to the mikveh, shaved. Then he came across the Kever Tahom. He didn't find out about the Kever Tahom until he finished the 30 days of completing this whole Nazirus. He didn't find out. Then he found out. Then he's okay. The same thing with
before the end of the 30 days?
No. We learned yesterday it's got to be at the end of the 30 days. If he found out in the middle, that's so, sir. It's a special kula. If he found out that Nazir, and the same thing with the Korban Pesach guy, he didn't find out that he came across the Korban Tahom until he finished bringing his Korban Pesach. In case like that, he doesn't bring a second Korban Pesach. That's halacha mashmisian. In case of a Nazir who came across a Nazir, a Kever Tahom or Tumas Tahom while he was in his 30 days, or in this case, even he was in his 30 days after, but he wasn't tummy anymore. In case he was tummy lames, in case he did attend a funeral, he had been purified from that already. That's what Rav Hamnuna is saying. A Nazir who finished his purification, he did his 7 days while he went to a funeral, finished his 7 days, and he shaved. And he came across now a Kever Tahom, but he didn't find about the Kever Tahom until he finished his 30 days. It's okay. That's Rav Hamnuna's point. Rabbi asked him, what about our Mishnah? Mishnah says that it doesn't help if he went down to the mikveh, he's still tamei. He's still tamei. If he went down to the mikveh and came across a Kever Tahom, that's speaking about where he was still tamei. He was just going into the mikveh now. He hadn't shaved yet for the 7 days. He hadn't yet performed the tiglachas of tumah. That's what he says. Amalei. So back in the Gemara, in the 5th line, Rabbi Hamnuna said to Rabbi, I'm molded to you by Nazir shemachusar tiglachas. If he hasn't shaved yet, you're right. Then he's still tamei. Even if it was a Kever Tahom, it won't help him. Kever Tahom is only if he's tahor. As far as he knows, he's tahor. He's counting his days of Nazirus, and he only found out about the Kever Tahom after he finishes Nazirus, meaning after he brought the carbon of the 30 days, or according to Blezer, he had a shave after the 30 days.
Like a year later?
Yeah, well, for sure a year later, because what happened was he came across the Kever Tahom while he was in his 30 days, right? But he didn't know about it. He found out about it after he finished. Now, after he finishes Nazirus, what does it mean after he finished? He finished the 30 days. The next day he brought a carbon or all his carbonis and he shaved. Then he found out about it a year later, like you say, or a month later. You know what? During the time of Nazirus, you visited that, you went to that archaeological site or something, and now we found a dead body there. You understand? So does it knock it all off? No, it doesn't make it so. It's after he finishes Nazirus. That's the point. that he found out only after he finished his Nizir. It doesn't make any difference when he found out. He found out afterwards. And so he's saying it doesn't knock it off because that's a special kula of a Nazir Osa Pesach by Kever Tom when he didn't know at the time that he came across a Kever Tom. If he found out that he came across it immediately or before the 30 days is over, then it is Sosa. Amalei Rava, so Rava said to Rav Menuna, okay, right, thank you. You're moted to me. As you're moted to me to the Mishnah, but the Mishnah is speaking about a case where he hadn't purified himself yet from the Tumas mess. He had just gone down to the mikveh, he hadn't shaved yet. And you're moted in that case. You're speaking about a case that the Nazir is okay, where he had finished the process of purifying himself from the Tumas mess, and now he was in his 30 days. And then he found out later on. My only question to you was from Nazir. What does it mean Osa Pesach? A guy was about to make a Korban Pesach, but he had gone to a funeral. And then, let's say on the 7th day of purification was Erev Pesach when he brought his Korban Pesach. But then he was exposed to Kever Tahom when he was already purified from that. He was purified. And then he brought his Korban Pesach thinking he was purified, and then afterwards they found out that he was exposed to Kever Tahom. There's lo mechusar v'lakum. In a case of the Nazir has to shave. In the case of the Korban Pesach, he's just tummy mace. He doesn't have to shave. He just has to purify himself. So since he's not missing anything, so Rav says, I'm moted to you. What did the Gemara say at the top of the page? Nazir Osa Pesach. He's making his Korban Pesach today, but after he had purified himself on the 3rd and the 7th days and gone to the mikvah, he then came across a Kever Tahom that he didn't know about, found out about it later on, then he's okay. So Rabba said, well, what about the Nazir? That's not the case in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is speaking about where he hadn't purified himself yet. He still had to shave. But Rav Meir is talking about where he shaved already, so he's purified. Says Rabba, okay, thank you for being moted to me in that case, and I moted to you in the case of Osa Pesach, because in the case of Osa Pesach, there's no further purification necessary. He was sprinkled on the 3rd and 7th day, and he went to the mikveh. Now went to the mikveh that day, on the 7th day. Then he came across a Tumas Tahom that he didn't know about till later on, after he did his Korban Pesach. It's okay. There he's not missing anything. Amalei Abai, so Abai said to him,
but he found out beforehand?
No.
He did the Korban Pesach?
No. He found out afterwards.
It's only after.
Only afterwards. Take a little Rashi on the second line of Rashi, the end of the second line from the top of the page. Below no delosa Pesach, Acha Osa Pischo, Ula Nazrat Shaman and Naziroso. The Gilach is only if you find out. That's the basic idea. This special kula of only on a certain case where he was tamei, he was tar at the time. Retroactively, not retroactively, after the fact, it's not retroactive. After the fact, we found out, ex post facto, he found out that he had become tamei. But at the time that he became tamei, he was tar. Before he was exposed to the Kever Tahom, he was tar. If he was tamei, it didn't work.
Under both those conditions.
Right. Then it'll fine. Then it works. Okay. So Amalei Abai, what do you mean? Even by the Korban Pesach, he's missing Erev Shemesh. The Nazir, the guy who's making his Korban Pesach on Erev Pesach, and it's the 7th day of Tara. He was sprinkled already. Today's the 7th day. He went to the mikvah. He still can't eat the Korban Pesach. He can't touch it. We can't be osik with it till Leila Seder, which is coming up, right? Why? Because he needs Erev Shemesh, the purification. You go to the mikvah in these cases, and you need Erev Shemesh. Person's a Tomei Sheretz or a Shichva Zera. What does he do? Goes to the mikvah, then he waits for Erev Shemesh for the evening. So he's missing that. Amalei, so Rava said to him, Shim Shim Amela Arba, the sun sets by itself. The sun sets by itself. It sets automatically. The sun sets by itself. That's something he has to do. This svara of the sun sets by itself, and therefore he's not mechusser anything. He doesn't have to do anything. Abaye asked the question, but Abaye agreed with it also. Abaye also retracted his question because he also holds of the shemesh sets by itself. The Tanya. Yom Los, let's understand something. Let's go back now to a different. A woman gives birth. If it's a boy, she's tummy for 7 days, and then she has 33 days of Yomei Tara. She goes to the mikveh after 7 days, 33 days of Yomei Tara. Any blood she sees then is Tara. After the periods of Yom Los, finishes the full 40 days, that's 7 and 33. Then she brings a car on the 41st day. She goes to the mikveh and she brings a carbon. If she give birth to a girl, let's take a case of a girl. Girls makes more sense here. We'll see. She has 14 days of Tumah, then goes to the mikveh, then she has 66 days of Tahara, total of 80 days. On the 81st day, that's called Yom Los, the day she completed. And then she goes to the mikveh and she brings her korbanos. Okay. It says Yom Los, let's say she miscarried. It's impossible really to have another baby 81 days later after she had the first baby, a viable baby, right? That's not going to work, right? But she had a baby girl. So she has now comes to her 81st day, and now she miscarried on the 81st day. Yom Los Tavi, she has to bring a carbon. Now the korbanos that Yoletis has to bring, she has to bring for baby number one. Let's call it baby number one. And then there's baby number two, which is a miscarriage. Okay. Then she has to bring separate korbanos for baby number one and baby number two. Tochmos Lo Tavi. But let's say she miscarried on the 80th day. She hadn't finished yet her days of Tahara. Then she doesn't bring a carbon yet because it's all considered in one, right? Because it's in Yom Los. If she finished it, then she has to bring. In other words, once she's in on the 81st day, when she's already set to bring her carbon for baby number one, and now she gave birth to baby number two. It's a miscarriage, but it doesn't make any difference. It's still a baby. So say she brings a second carbon for that. But let's say she gave birth to baby number two on day 80 or day 79, whatever, of the first baby, of baby number one. She doesn't bring a separate carbon. Okay, okay, fine. She doesn't bring for baby number two because baby number two was born before she completed full 80 days of number one. But let's say she now had a baby. She had a baby on day number 100, let's say, a third baby, a third miscarriage. It's probably also not likely, but let's call it day 150. Let's make more sense of here. She had baby number one. Baby number two was born on day 80. It was a miscarriage, but it was baby number two, also a girl. So she'd have 80 days from there. Okay, 80 days from there would take us to day 160. On day 150, she had a third baby. Now, the third baby, she chayav a carbon for the third baby because that was after the first 80 days, but it was in the middle of the second 80 days. So that's the question. So Aval Tavi, you might think Yachalo Tavi Aleda Shofim is fine. She wouldn't bring a baby. She wouldn't bring a carbon for baby number two, which was born on day 80 or day 79, 78 for sure. Aval Tavi Aleda Shachar Malos 50 after, if she had a baby after Malos, after the 80 days, she had a third baby, let's say on day 150, and she would require Tamalom Malos Meitara. Biyom Malos Tavi, Tach Malos Lo Tavi. When she finishes a day, when she finishes her full count or completion of days, that she can bring a carbon, and she can bring a carbon now, then she brings Tochmos Lo Tavi. She's still Tochmos. In other words, she's still within 80 days of the second one. So she wouldn't bring a carbon for the third one either. She wouldn't bring a carbon for the second one because that was in the middle of the first 80 days, and she wouldn't bring a carbon for the third one because that was the middle of the the second 80 days. That's what he said. Okay, that's what he said. That's the halacha that a woman who gave birth to a baby girl, and then 80 days later or 79 days later she gave birth to another girl, doesn't bring a carbon for the second one. Let's say 75 days later, 80 days later, whatever, she gave birth to another one, within that, also she doesn't bring. Rav Kana, and Rav Kana said about that, what's the difference between the second and the third? What's the reason why you wouldn't bring, in this case of the third baby? Because you're missing a carbon. You're not yet in the time when you can bring a carbon. There also, you're missing, even on the 80, even if she had the baby on the 81st day. What's the difference between having the baby on the 81st day and having on the 80th day? You're saying because on the 80th day, she's not yet right to bring a carbon, but on the 81st she could. But even on the 81st day, she's still missing Harav Shemesh. She went to the mikvah, but she still has to wait for Harav Shemesh for the sundown. Abai said, Shimshim Amela Arva, the sun sets by itself. So here you see that Abai retracted. Before he asked the kasha, Abai said, what do you mean you're missing Harav Shemesh? In the case of Osa Pesach, even if he went to the mikvah on the seventh day, and now he came across it, you say he's tar, basically. He's still missing Erev Shemesh. Erev Shemesh is not so important. It sets by itself. That's what we answered Abai before. Now you see Abai himself retract because Abai himself said over here, Shim Shema Mela Arva, therefore, she had the baby on the 81st. If she had if she once she came across her 81st day, she could bring a carbon, even though she's supposed to go to the mikveh and wait for Harav Shemesh. But that Harav Shemesh, if she's gone to the mikveh already, she's right to bring a carbon, even though Harav Shemesh hasn't happened yet. And therefore, so you see, Abaya holds of this concept also that the Harav Shemesh is not, doesn't hold it back. It's not Muchas or Kippurim because it comes by itself. So you see that he also holds of this idea. Let's just see the Mishnah. The Mishnah says like this. Again, the previous Mishnah had said, we talked about our Mishnah that that if the Nizir went down to be Matar himself, and he's Tomei. Remember, when does the Tumas Tom work? Only when he was Tomei, he was Tar at the time. He was pure at the time. He was ritually pure at the time that he was exposed to the Kever Tahom. Then it works. But let's say he wasn't ritually pure. He went down to the mikveh where there was a Kever Tahom. There was a body that was embedded in the ground of the mikveh, the cavern, whatever, wherever there was water there, a lake. He went down there to be matar himself because he was tamei. Then it doesn't help. Why? Because of the presumption of tamei. If he's tamei now, the tevertum, the kul of kevertum doesn't work. The presumption of tamei is tamei. Sure, if he was tamei now, we assume he's still tamei. So this idea of raglayim medaber is used now for a totally different concept. Hamotz mes, you find a dead body. Now, a dead body normally is kona makomo. If somebody, let's say a guy died and the owner let him say, okay, you can bury it. He was on the road. It happened in those days. They didn't have cemeteries. People died on the road. Okay, you could have this spot. That's his. You can't move him because once he was buried with permission, you can't move him. But if we were speaking about where it wasn't buried with permission, a person was just digging up or checking things or whatever, clearing the roads, and they found the body that was there that didn't have permission to be buried there. But tchila, and it was the first time you didn't know it was there. You found it now. It was a new thing. Mushkav Kedarko, laying down buried there. Note that you can move in Best Fusoso and the surrounding earth. You can move the body, let's say, to make to clear the road, so the Kohen can walk there. Shneim found even two bodies. Note the same thing. We found three bodies. We'll see the way they had burial grounds. They buried them in sepulchers and in the stone or in the ground. Usually it was like underground. They buried them. They would bury them in groups, and they had a whole graveyard. And the graveyard, if the three bodies were between 4 and 8 amas if they were in length and 4 amas in width, if it was between the first, one gear says the first to the second, another gear says first to the third, there was the distance of not more than 4 amas. That's called the Shchonas Kavaros. There was buried, if it's between 4 and 8 amas, this is already a graveyard, you can't move it. So if you found 1, you can move it. You found 2, you can move it. You found 3, you can't move it. And what you have to do is, if Boda came in and you check from there, if there were 3 or together, it's possible that there was more. So you check there, along Esser Amas, you've checked 20 Amas in each direction. Motzach B'Sofes, we found 1 body at the end 20, then you continue checking. Boda came in Olaholim because they would bury them in groups. There are different ways that did them, either 6 or 8 or 12. There are different ways that they buried them. But if you found 1 body by itself, you can move it. So that was, once you find 3, you have to assume that it's a graveyard, and you check. And if you find another body 20 amas later, you keep on going another 20 amas. Because there's reason to believe that this is already a graveyard. In other words, why? If you found, let's say, the single grave that was 20 amas away, if you found that first, and that's all you found, there was nothing next to it, there was no 2 or 3 together there, then you could have just taken it away. But once you found 3, there's reason to suspect that this is a graveyard, and you have to keep checking 20 amas in all directions until there's no more bodies. All right, we'll pick it up here tomorrow, Mr. Have a good day.
Thank you.